Hey guys, Tommy here with the Fast Lane Car, and today we are discussing the truth about German off-roaders and why you might want to consider buying one. Now recently here at TFL, we have acquired quite a fleet of offbeat German used off-road vehicles. We've got our Porsche Cayenne, we've got our Volkswagen Touareg, we've got the Mercedes Ml, and we're going to talk about today why these might be great choices for you out there for cars that you probably have never ever even thought about or considered taking off-road and buying as kind of a cheap used way to have fun out in the wilderness. But first, before we get to that, I want to give you a quick update on our 2012 Porsche Cayenne Turbo, which we recently had wrapped to look like an old school Porsche Cayenne Trans-Siberia. Alex has that video. Take a look right now.
Now we wanted to replicate the original Trans-Siberia as closely as possible. So if you look at the side of the original one and then look at the side of this one, it's pretty much identical. So we have the same Cayenne font along the side and even the same font over here. Of course it says Trans Rockies on our version instead of Trans-Siberia, and even down to the year. We put a 2020 on here. This is a 2012 Cayenne, but 2020 is the year we turned it into the Trans Rockies, and if you look at the original says 2007. So the side decal is spot on to what the original Trans-Siberia looks like. And we match that orange everywhere else. So if you look on the original Trans-Siberia, it has an orange mirror cap. We did the same thing here. The stripe from the side of the doors kind of continues onto the front bumper, so we replicated that here as well. And then under these running lights, there's these two kind of fins that stick out a little bit, these kind of plastic accents. We also vinyl wrapped those orange as well. And one more thing, we'll shoot over to the back. Once again, that stripe continues along the rear bumper, but we also vinyl wrapped this top portion right here, this kind of little spoiler that hangs off the back of the Cayenne. This was orange on the original Trans-Siberia, and it is orange on our TFL Trans Rockies.
There you have it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. It's fully wrapped in the orange accents. And now we just have to wait for the 3 feet of snow outside to melt, and then we can go take it off-road way up in the mountains and see how it does. But let's get back on subject. Now traditionally, if you want an off-road vehicle in the used market, you go out and buy something like a Toyota 4Runner, maybe a Nissan Frontier, Toyota Tacoma, or a Lexus GX if you're a little bit quirky. But you know, here at TFL, we've never felt that these were unusual enough, not rare enough, not different enough. So we kind of started looking around and seeing what other options were out there for affordable ways to go off-road. And it turns out that if you go across the pond to Germany, the Germans have been busy for many years making some really cool things that we never even considered as being off-road worthy. Now the Germans are known for making Autobahn monsters, but it's not the first place you think of if you're thinking about hitting the rocks, because frankly, Germany just doesn't have all that much off-roading. But it turns out that they actually do have some pretty cool stuff they've been cooking up over the years. Now, of course, when it comes to off-roading in Germany, the #1 vehicle that comes to mind is the Mercedes-Benz G Wagon. This is an old school body-on-frame, squared-off truck designed actually for militaries in the late 1970s. And frankly, this vehicle is almost as good as anything available on the market. It's got solid axles front and rear, it's got 3 locking differentials, it's got a ton of ground clearance, and it's built like a rock. They're very expensive, brand new, they're well over $125,000, but we've proven that they're very off-road capable. Probably no surprise to many of you out there.
So you think I'd be enjoying this, but I'm not. And that's really the problem. When you have a car that's this capable and yet this expensive, it's just a little terrifying actually, because you know that your next stop might be to the Mercedes dealer where it's going to get very expensive very quickly. All 3 diffs are locked. This is nerve-wracking. Car is more capable than I am. Oh!
Alright, so the Mercedes G Wagon is probably not a surprise for many of you out there who know what it's made of, who know what it can do. But what about the lesser breed of off-roaders. And it turns out there's a ton of them, starting with the Volkswagen Touareg. Now, if you watch the channel, you probably know that we have a lot of experience with our 2004 Touareg. It was a vehicle designed by Volkswagen in the early 2000s to compete with the onslaught of luxury SUVs that was happening a couple decades ago. And it's tremendous out in the rough stuff. Let's go outside and take a look at what it has to offer. So the great thing about these old German luxury land yachts is that they are so comfortable, especially with air suspension. This Touareg just completely floats along. It also has 4 heated seats of 5 positions, a heated steering wheel, it's got leather everywhere, navigation, and it costs $4,000. But there's a lot more to it than just that. Let's take a look at some of the off-road goodies. So in this Volkswagen here, I've got a high range and a low range with a center locker and a diff locker. I have 3 positions here on the suspension, and then another 4 positions actually on the air suspension, and then some even had, get this, a disconnectable front sway bar. So these are the real deal. Alright, so pretty cool stuff, right? I mean, low range, locking diffs, a lot of ground clearance, pretty surprising. But here's the thing about a lot of these German off-roaders, you really have to know what to look for. Because if I say the word Touareg, you're probably thinking of, your standard SUV that's meant to take the kids to soccer practice, and you're absolutely right, that's what a lot of them were. But the thing with the Germans is, you gotta know what to look for. You have to look for very specific options that make them incredible off-road. So for example, on the Touareg, most of them are V6s with steel springs and no diff lock. But if you look around carefully enough, you'll find ones like ours that have the air suspension, that have the rear diff lock, that have all the fun stuff you really need to hit the sand and to hit the mud. So how do you do that? Well, unfortunately, it's not like a 4Runner. So for example, if you go out and buy a brand new 4Runner right now, any trim, be it an SR5 or a TRD Off-Road or a TRD Pro, are going to be very good off-road. But with these German vehicles, only certain trims are going to be very good off-road. So you have to go find the Touareg with the rear diff lock. You do want to find one with the air suspension, and they're very rare because they're very expensive. You see, Germany and the engineers in Germany are kind of unlike every other country in the world. They don't do things half done. Let me give you an example. So launch control. Launch control is a technology that's been around for many years now. It's a way to get a car from 0 to 60 in the fastest way possible. And if you look at a vehicle like the Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT, it's got launch control. You set an RPM, you hit the throttle, it revs to like 3,000 RPM, and then it takes off. It's pretty cool, but it's not really all that impressive. And that's because launch control is very hard on the vehicle's components. And Jeep knows that, hey, if we just engineer this to be pretty cool, but also save the transmission and the engine, it's going to be the best of both worlds. But the Germans will never look at launch control like that. They're either going to go all out or not do it at all. And in the case of their launch control, that's exactly how it works. So on the Jeep, you push a button, hold the gas, hold the throttle, and off you go. On a BMW, to use launch control, you have to push the start button, turn the engine on, it has to be running for a certain amount of time. Then you have to put the transmission into sport mode, put the engine into sport plus mode, hold the traction control for 2 seconds, not 3, not 1.5, 2, swing a dead duck over your head for about 35 seconds, hold both paddle shifters, write a letter to Angela Merkel asking for launch control to activate, and 1 out of 25 times you'll actually get it to work. But oh my god, when you get a German launch control to work, it is incredible. Like on the Porsches, 7,000 RPM, then fly off the line like nothing else. It works incredibly well. But the reason it's so hard to activate is because it's bad for the transmission. They know, and actually they give you a little disclaimer that if you use this too many times, you're going to cause damage to the vehicle. Because they're not going to design a launch control that's sort of cool but also sort of reliable. They're going to design a launch control that'll tear your face off, but if you do it too much, you'll end up tearing the transmission out of the car. And it's the same thing with their off-roading tech. So if you buy a base model Touareg, it's not going to be all that amazing off-road until you buy the off-road hardware to make it amazing off-road. And that hardware is great, but it's also super, super, super expensive to engineer and to manufacture, which means it's pretty rare in the used car market. Let me give you another example. The Porsche Cayenne, the sister car to the Touareg. Now, if you look at the first generation, you'll see a ton of them with all sorts of different options and colors and Porsche headrests in the seats and different infotainment systems, but you'll very rarely find the off-road package. Because once again, the German manufacturer went all out with the off-road package. A Cayenne with a PT1 or PT2 off-road package gave you real rock rails, it gave you real underbody protection, skid plates, it gave you a locking rear differential, it gave you 12 inches of ground clearance, and it also cost like $5,000 because it was so out there. But what that meant is that nobody bought it. Nobody wanted the off-road package because, first of all, brand new in 2008, who's going to take their Cayenne off-road? Nobody. And why would you buy an off-road package for a car you're not going to take off-road? These were expensive performance SUVs. So the only way you'd find an off-road package on a Cayenne is if some rich guy came into a dealer, wrote a blank check and said, I'm just going to tick every single box. I want all the silly headrests, I want the crazy color, and then maybe at the very bottom they'll select the off-road package if they're rich enough. Or you had the crazy guy that came in and knew exactly what it was and spec'd it right off the bat. Both of these are exceptionally rare. So let me give you an example. When we were shopping for first generation Cayennes, we probably looked at 500, 600 cars on the listings. And of all of those cars, we found exactly one that had the off-road package with the rock rails and the locking diffs and all the cool stuff. It was $27,000. We called the dealer. He wasn't willing to compromise, so we walked away. And that's the thing, is it's very, very hard to find these cars equipped with the off-road groups. Same thing with our Cayenne, the second generation. We actually don't even have the full off-road group because we couldn't find one. We have the locking rear diff, but we don't have the rock rails or the underbody protection because it simply wasn't out there. They're so incredibly rare. And the funny thing is there are more cars like that in this world. Let's take, for example, the Mercedes-Benz Gl, the first and the second generation. They were also, believe it or not, available with off-road packages. And just like the Cayenne, they were amazing off-road. We actually took a few of them off-road way back in 2012, 2013. They had air suspension that would go up to like 11 or 12 inches of ground clearance, locking rear diff, they had underbody protection, locking center diff. They were so good off-road. But once again, they were so expensive to equip that nobody did it. There are some classic German off-roaders where there were no off-road packages, like the first generation Mercedes ML, the one we just bought. That one actually is also very good off-road. It has a 2-speed transfer case, it's got body-on-frame construction. All of those are going to be equipped about the same for off-roading. That's a great car if you want an affordable way to go have fun off-road. But you have to be so careful because then the second generation ML were really not meant for off-roading whatsoever here in the US. They didn't have any off-road groups. They were single-speed transfer case, unibody construction. They weren't very good. So you really got to do your research to find out what you're looking for. And there's even, on the new Spectrum, an off-road package on the Cayenne, which is, drumroll please, about $7,300 to equip on a base model car. So here's the thing about the German off-roaders. If you know what you're looking for, they are amazing off-road. But if you get the wrong one, you're going to be desperately disappointed. This Cayenne is the epitome of the kind of deal you can get on these used German SUVs. $130,000 when new in 2012. We bought this one last year for just over 20 grand. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. And take a look at what it can do when you raise up its suspension. Now take a look at this. This is a 500 horsepower, 170 mile an hour SUV that's jacked itself up to 11 inches of ground clearance. If that doesn't tell you how motivated these Germans were toward the crazy engineering in these SUVs, I don't know what does. Oh, and by the way, this Trans-Rockies is inspired by the first generation Cayenne Trans-Siberia, a cross-continent off-road challenge. And they sold a limited edition of orange and black Trans-Siberias back in the late 2000s. And even the off-road version of the Porsche Cayenne didn't come standard with the off-road group. That's how expensive it was. Now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is long-term reliability, because that's what you're all going to be keyboard commanding right now and yelling me about. Now yes, it's true, I don't think that some of these classic German off-roaders are going to be anywhere near as reliable as like a Toyota 4Runner or a Toyota Land Cruiser or even like a Nissan Frontier. They're just very complicated and very over-engineered with a lot of electronics, and after 10, 15, 20 years, these things tend to go wrong. But here's the way I look at it. A 2004 Land Cruiser with about 150, maybe even 180,000 miles is still going to be 11, 12 grand, whereas our 2004 Touareg was 4 grand. So a lot of stuff can break before you're even anywhere near the cost of that Land Cruiser. Same thing with used Foreigners. They still are $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, $11,000. So if you go in with that mindset that, hey, I'm going to buy this old ML or I'm going to buy this old GL with the off-road group, I know it's going to break, but I'm saving so much money over the Japanese competition that I'm okay fixing it, you're going to be a lot better off. Because yes, it will break, and it probably will be expensive to fix. But it's totally worth it in my mind because A, the cost of entry is so low, and B, I like having something offbeat. I like being the only one on the trail with that Touareg. I think it's really cool showing up to people with Jeeps and being like, hey, check this out. This is what 4 grand of German technology can do. So no, I don't think you should shy away from German off-roaders whatsoever. I just think you have to go in with the mindset that yes, they're going to break, yes, they're going to be expensive to fix, but you also have to go in the mindset with, I have to be really picky with what I'm going to buy. So I've thrown a lot of things at you. Let me break down what I think are good off-roaders to buy. We'll go just down the list. So Volkswagen Touareg, first or second generation here in the US, so that's like 2004 through the late 2000s. Options to look for, definitely the rear diff lock, and perhaps the air suspension if you can find it. Now in a previous video I said that all Touaregs, if you wanted the rear diff lock, needed the air suspension. I was actually wrong about that. I'm sorry, I apologize. Some people sent me some really unusual listings. It turns out you can buy like a V6 car with steel suspension and that rear locker. So definitely look for one of those are really cool. Mercedes-Benz Ml First-Generation, just about anything from 98 through 2005 are going to be pretty good. 320s, ML55s, the 430s, they all have body on frame construction, they all have 2-speed transfer cases. Porsche Cayenne First-Generation or First-Generation after the facelift, with specifically the off-road package, air suspension, locker, all the full underbody protection. Extremely hard to find. You're never going to find one, but if you do, definitely buy it. You have to go to VIN Analytics and plug in the VIN, look for the rear off-road group, but that's the one to get, absolutely. First and second generation Mercedes-Benz Gl. There were a couple different off-road groups depending on the year. One was like the Off-Road Pro package, one was called the On/Off-Road package. Very cool, very hard to find, very rare. Other ones you could look into getting is our Cayenne behind you, so that's the second generation Cayenne. They lost the low range, but you can still get the off-road group with the rear diff lock and some underbody protection. Also extremely hard to find. Let's see what else is a good one. The new Cayenne also has an off-road group. The new BMW X5 has an off-road group. And then any G Wagon is going to be amazing. If I left any out in the comment section below, let me know, but I think that's the majority you want to look out for. And let me know in the comment section below, do you think I'm right or wrong about this? I mean, this is a very exciting world that we're just kind of getting into, we're just trying to figure out, and we're trying to take you guys out along for the ride. Head over to tflcar.com for the latest and greatest in everything off-road, and we'll see you guys next time.